Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Tomorrow. Andrew and Mo here with you guys. First and foremost, we hope every one of you had a wonderful Easter weekend. I know Mo and I had the opportunity to escape for a little bit.
Yeah, we did.
You know, we talked, I think we might have mentioned that in one of the prior shows, but we did. We had the opportunity to escape down to Florida Keys, which, by the way, not too bad.
Not too bad at all. Perfect weather. You know, I hear Florida Keys in the June, July,
it's
August.
brutal.
It's brutal. So we had great weather. My first time going, so it was awesome. Went on a boat, went fishing. You know, played a little basketball. Tested that Achilles that's been had repaired a few years ago.
And that's like, listen, we're not talking about just a little bit of horse
No.
pig. Now we're talking about full on
basketball
brutal basketball
with some teenagers.
You know, if there's any strong principle that you need to keep in life, in my opinion, is you gotta stay. Your athletic ability has to stay at least 2 steps ahead of your children.
Oh, it has to.
It
has to.
You know, so when we go down there, it's like, okay, I gear up and get ready.
Yeah.
You know, like a few weeks ahead, you gotta thin out. You got to get your game on, and you got to be ready.
Yeah, halfway through the game, I was just like, wait a minute, hold on. I got to get a little focused right now because I can't lose this game. So, but no, it was great 5-6 days away, and now we're back. And great show we have for everyone today. We're gonna talk about generosity, but to kind of start off with a little bit of a recap of last week. Was first week of the second quarter. Mm-hmm. And we saw a little bit of a pullback in the market, just slightly, in the sense of the markets took a little bit of a breather. Several factors, in my opinion, that led to that. There's some geopolitical issues in the Middle East that kind of heightened up a little more. And then there were some talks about the idea of, with the strong economy that we're seeing right now, strong job growth, that the idea of interest rate cuts might be extended past 2025. Past 2024 to maybe even 25. So that kind of rattled the markets in some aspects, and we saw a little bit of a pullback. So Q2, can't believe we're already here, but Q2 of 24 started a little bumpy.
It is crazy that we're already here in Q2, nonetheless. Yeah. But you're right. I think I won't even attempt to say his last name, but the president of the Fed in Minneapolis. Yeah. Neil, I believe is his first name. Yeah, he basically came out and put that statement out there that, hey, listen, when you look at GDP growth, you look at payrolls that came out for non-farm payrolls that came out this past week. You look at inflation, you look at PCE, and the reality is this thing's moving kind of left to right.
Right.
We're not seeing a whole lot of rockiness ahead of us. And when you look at it from a macro standpoint, it looks smooth. And so for that reason, we may not see some of those rate cuts that, they've mentioned, of course, early on in the year, but they've also kind of put the estimates out even up until this past month regarding maybe some rate cuts in Q4. Who knows? If it does stay like it has been, then, at least from that perspective, there may not be a change. And, we'll just maybe status quo is better like it is,
it kind of just supports the idea and the thesis that we've heard for a while now, just higher for longer. Right?
Yeah.
Just higher for longer.
That is true. And oh shoot, I was gonna say something that come to mind, and it was so important. I'll forget about it. So we'll let it go.
Yeah.
But this upcoming week too, we got some great information coming in. We have Q1 earnings report starting up. We got several banks that's going to be posting. I think Chase, JP Morgan, Citibank is going to come out. Who was leading us off? Do you remember this week?
Delta
Airlines. Yeah. So we got Q1 earnings coming out, starting that season up. It's going to be interesting. CPI and PCI, I believe, is coming out this week as well. So, a lot of good data. Oh, I know what I was going to say.
Okay.
I know that many of you guys are probably like, look, man, I know that you look at this thing from a macro standpoint, it seems like it's moving left to right, but my personal story is different.
Right.
And so you got to take that into consideration. The cost of goods is super expensive. My 3 boys, I know for a fact, they're eating me out of house. We went on vacation, and this, we talked about we were down there. You go out to eat one time.
Yes.
And we're not talking about fine dining. We're talking about fried seafood, and you're spending $200 plus
$200
for a dinner. And I'm like, it's insane. And of course, we ended up eating in 4 or 5 nights.
4 or 5 nights, yeah. And even that wasn't inexpensive.
It
right?
wasn't, except it was mostly deer meat. So I took care of you there. But the truth is you throw that factor in there, who knows? But from a macro standpoint, which is what the feds are most concerned about, they're looking at these numbers, across the United States as a whole, and from their perspective, it seems smooth. And for that reason, why rock the boat?
Yeah.
But you're right. We have a lot of great content coming in. We have been on this real estate topic, okay, which I would highly recommend going back, watching these shows that we've put out there on our YouTube channel and on the podcast from and on the topic of real estate.
Yeah.
From real estate investing to short-term rentals to long-term rentals. We're going to take a quick break over the next few weeks, likely 3 weeks from that topic. Now, we're going to come back. We have a great interview on real estate investing and house flipping coming up, but we want to take a break in light of April, okay? And not just the month of April, but more so the celebration of Easter. This is something that I think it's obviously dear, I know, to you and to me, and that is that Easter represents one of the greatest, I guess I should say, celebration season, period. Okay? Now, some of you guys, I can respect that you may carry a different perspective, maybe a different belief, and maybe just a different understanding. So when we work through the next 3 weeks, here's what I want you to hang on to. We're going to talk about, specifically today, generosity, but generosity while utilizing the lens of Scripture, the foundation and the principles of Scripture to support the concept of being generous. You may not believe in what the Word says. You may not contribute all of this life that we live to a higher being and to a creator like Mo and I. What I would tell you, though, is that what you'll find is that the principles, apart from your belief, are foundational.
Yeah.
They're foundational to creating wealth, and they're foundational to receiving the benefit, maybe not financial, but receiving the benefit of being generous.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the mission for today. Several shows coming up over the next few weeks. Great content. I'm excited.
So am
You're
I.
ready to jump in?
Yeah, and I'll jump in with this quote from Jim Elliott, right? And the quote is, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep for gaining what he cannot lose." Okay?
He is no fool for keeping.
He's no fool who gives what he
cannot keep
for gaining what he cannot lose.
For gaining what he cannot lose.
Yes.
Yeah, that's deep.
That's deep.
Here's the deal. Where he's going with this is the whole idea, you can't take it with you.
You can't.
Okay? It's not a matter of if you're going to lose your wealth. You will lose it.
Right. You're going to lose it here on earth, or when
you lose it while you're living.
Yeah.
If you go through some poor economic season of life, like the Great Depression, the Great Recession, or if you make dumb, silly decisions, right, you could lose it then. Or you just leave it because you're leaving.
Right.
And that's one fact, obviously, that we can all accept is the reality that we're not always going to be here.
Believer or no believer.
Believer or non-believer, 100% of us will pass away, right? And the truth is he's saying, hey, is there this whole idea of paying it forward? Is it true? Is it better? Is that really what it means to not be a fool? Is to take the idea of I can actually pay this thing forward, and it's better than hoarding it today. Great way to start.
Yeah, that's a good way to start, because if you think about our time is limited here on Earth, right? And so I love this. I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's not about when your birthday or your end date. It's what's in between. What have you done in between those time? In between those.
That's
dates.
A great poem, by the way.
Yeah. I was trying to think about it off the top of my head, but I couldn't remember.
It's called The Dash.
The Dash is what it is. Okay,
that was my dad's favorite poem.
Was it really?
I ended up reading it at his funeral, but yeah, it was his favorite poem.
Because it's so true.
Long story short, you guys want some insight on a personal life? My dad, when I was acting a fool in high school, being dumb, he literally comes and picks me up at a party. I shouldn't have been out.
I think I know this party.
I didn't. I told him.
Well, I think I know this story.
I told him I wasn't there, and we call it intuition. We call it, just the Lord giving him some guidance here. he found me, and I was quite nervous. My dad, many people know him, generous, loving guy, has that thick Italian side to him.
Okay.
You didn't want to make him mad. You didn't want to make him mad. Okay? We're driving home, and he literally, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. He passes by the graveyard, the neighborhood. And I'm like, I'm sitting there, we ain't talking. I'm mad because he's done embarrassed me, picking me up at my friend's house. Like, I'm not happy. He's driving by our neighborhood. Now I'm thinking, where we going? Like, where we headed? Okay? Now, we lived in Cassville, Georgia, and there is a Civil War graveyard in Cassville, Georgia.
I know it.
Okay? It's a big graveyard. And so he pulls into this graveyard, and now I'm like, what's going on? Now, I'm feeling a little bit nervous now. I'm like,
is there a hole ready?
He ain't saying nothing. I'm not saying nothing. But now I'm like, okay, I'm not mad anymore. I'm just nervous. And I'm like, what in the heck? So we go up the hill behind the graveyard, and he turns off the car, says, get out. And I'm like,
are you kidding me?
Snap. This is not good. This is not, my whole situation
this
tonight.
This is not what I was expecting.
Yeah, it went turned around on me. And but anyway, he gets me out of the car. We walk. I follow him. We walk over to just literally some random headstones. And he says, tell me what you say about their story. And we're just talking. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm irritated, high school kid. I said, well, a name, date of birth, date of death. He said, which one's more important? And I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, if it's me, everybody that knew that person, very few remember the birth moment, and some will remember the death moment. Everybody that talks about that person will remember the dash, the life they lived. And so he was playing on that concept of the poem.
The poem, the dash.
You should read it. It's a good one. It's a good one. Sorry, got on a tangent there.
No, that's a good segue in some aspects because you grew up in a missionary lifestyle. So going back to your father, so I would say that if anyone has a real understanding of the impact of generosity, not just financially, but just generosity overall, could be you and your family, right?
Yeah.
You grew up as your family were missionaries, building churches, not just here in the U.S. but overseas, and so you obviously you tell your story better than mine, but I know there were times when you and your sisters were downstairs folding letters, stamping envelopes, sending them out for those who gave support, station wagons being donated to you, but
beaver panels
on the side. But the idea of generosity has been a foundation in your upbringing. And I would say that generosity for most people should be something that's not a stage in their life. It should be a foundation, a core principle of their life, giving back to those who either less fortunate financially, less fortunate with resources, just having a hard time, just the blessings that we have, that everyone has, if you really truly think about it, should be used and utilized as efficiently during that dash as possible.
Yeah. You're right. I always will say, I think I got the best of both worlds growing up. My father and mother, when my dad graduated high school, he attended Toccoa Falls Bible College, which ended up being where he met Mom. And, his mission from a very early and young age was to do something to spread the gospel. And when I say a young age, I mean, he was committed early. If you talk to my uncle, my dad had 3 siblings. If you talk to his brother, my dad was the oldest of 4, so his brother was the youngest of the 4. There was quite an age difference there. They shared a bedroom. And back when my dad was in his early teens, my uncle will tell you, and they were not really raised, to my knowledge, in a very Christian-oriented home, if at all. But he would every evening pull out the word. He was reading. He was praying. He would tell John will literally tell you this. He would tell John, hey, this is my time. I need to be reading. You want to read with me? We'll pray together. And he would read. And I'm talking early teens.
Wow.
So when he graduated high school, he was fairly committed on his mission and what he felt like the Lord had called him to, and what I think you and I would say the Lord's called us all to, is to be mission-minded, kingdom-minded, and focused on people. And so fast forward, he's Marion mom. They're at Toccoa Falls Bible College, big inspiration on starting a church, starting a missions organization. So yes, I had the opportunity of being a child of a pastor, being a child of a man who took his family overseas. We lived in Costa Rica for quite some time, but also coming back to the U.S., where he ran a organization called Global Missions International. And, so we were dependent on people's generosity, and so I got to see that side of it. What did it look like? I have a lot of respect for my father, because when we were younger, and I didn't know this to begin with, but I caught on to it the older I got, is that he would literally run a paper route at like 1 or 2 in the morning. My mom would watch children, just to try to keep from using the resources that people were generous with on personal needs, bread on the table type of thing. And he would take as much of that generosity and put it toward the kingdom. And by kingdom, what I mean by that is he had full-time locals in different countries throughout the world. And he would travel and support them in their mission, local mission in these different rural communities. So I got to see what that was like, the sacrifice he made, the generosity of other people, and really set my foundation, And you're right. I can remember those days, Mo, sitting there. Oh my gosh, every month, like an assembly line. You know what I mean? So you got Nicole Ramber tri-folding these letters, okay, these newsletters that sent out, and then someone stuffing them, someone licking them. Oh my gosh, why in the world we never learned to use like a wet napkin or?
Oh, it's old school.
I'm like, what are we talking about? There's no telling, how many years we cut off our life by licking 300 envelopes a month, stamping them, and getting them out the door. But yeah, that was a monthly occasion, but it was good. It was really good. Generous. My dad was, and my mom and my family, and you're right, not just generous with money, generous in life, as a principle and a foundation of life.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, to sum it up, the thought that I have from my childhood is that, generosity is not something that you inspire to be, okay? It's just something you are. And it's not a place. It's not a location. It's like I understand the concept of trying to become stable to do something. I need to become stable to get married. I need to become stable to buy a house. I need to become stable, to have children.
Mm-hmm.
Generosity is just a way of life.
Yes.
Whether it's your time, your skills, your finances, generosity is just a place to be. And that's how I was raised.
Yeah, and I think generosity, there's a direct link between generosity and gratitude, because the more generous you are, I think you naturally get this sense of thankfulness for the position that you're in, and for the position that you are able to help others, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that cycle repeats itself, and all of a sudden you would realize that more blessings are coming your way, because you're being a good steward of the resources that are being handed to you, right?
Regardless of what those blessings are.
Right? It shows that cycle of just being generous, receiving and understanding that gratitude and being thankful just kind of repeats itself over and over. And then it builds that layer of that foundation, that core principle that I think we all, I won't say strive for, but we all should strive for.
Mm-hmm.
And so bringing it back on a spiritual or scriptural reference, it's littered all over the Bible.
Oh, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere about the idea of being generous. And just some quotes right here. If you go, Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 through 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Verse 9, chapter 10, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 24 to 25, one person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. Right? These are just two right now that I can think of.
You know, I want to say something real quick on a few of those verses that you just mentioned. I heard a gentleman speak. It must have been probably a decade ago at least, and people would know him too if I could think of his name. But we heard him. Amy and I went to hear him speak a few times down in Atlanta, and he made a statement that has always connected with me, and that is that the promise of Scripture, ultimately the promises that are coming from God and Jesus, are contingent, oftentimes, if not always, on the obedience to His command. Mm-hmm. And so you look at the verses that you just read. You said, "Honor the Lord with your wealth, and with the first fruits, all of your produce." Then, right? Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your understanding, and acknowledge Him, and He will make your ways and your path straight. This whole concept that, you know, we can be cheerful givers, okay? It's not always cheerful to write a check.
It's not.
It's not always cheerful to donate your time.
Yes.
Right? And it's not, and that's okay. What's crazy, though, is that these benefits of being generous, once again, rather you're a believer or not, or whatever you want to subscribe it to, the reality is the principle of benefiting from being generous happens most often after the act of obedience.
Right.
Right? You have to be obedient first. You have to kind of grind through, do the right thing, do what you feel like you should do and what you're called to do, and then the benefits and the thankfulness, the gratitude, all that comes and plays a part, oftentimes post.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes, you know, if the treasure or the reward that you receive, you may not see it here. Right, it may be eternal treasures you're storing for yourself when we leave this earth, and then it can also be for the generation behind that you leave behind. That the promise that you're expecting, or the promise that God promises, may be for someone else in your lineage or down the road. Right. So, but you're right. It takes the first step of the action of doing. Of actually doing the steps and the disciplines to get the blessing at the end.
It is true. You know, I want to share a personal story on that real quick, and it's this whole idea that we oftentimes benefit as the individual being the source of generosity more so than the one receiving. Okay, it's just kind of a weird concept. You know, I do believe that oftentimes the Lord is as much focused on who needs a resource as who to use to give that resource, right? So He's looking for essentially a vessel that He can work through as a source to be generous with, okay? And going back on my life, this whole concept of being generous has been distilled from day one. And I think early on in our marriage, you know, Amy and I, we were married. I was married at 20 years old. Amy was 22 years old. I lost my job working on a chicken farm literally 6 weeks before we got married. You know, you're going through those what I'm going to say is very foundational, normal grinding season, right?
But it feels different when you're going through it.
Oh, it feels terrible. It's terrible, right?
Right.
And so, you know, I remember going to my dad, and this is not just one occasion, this is multiple occasions. And I would say, hey, we're struggling. I can't get on my feet. We're struggling. And his consistent response to me, now I get it. Then used to frustrate the hound out of me. I mean, not good. And he would say, are you being generous? Are you giving? I'm like, did you hear anything I just said?
I got nothing to give.
I'm broke, man. What do you mean am I giving? Are you being generous? But this whole idea that, hey, if you can be a good steward with a little, then Andrew, long term, you're going to find that God can trust you with a lot. Okay? And once again, this is true. It's a principle of what we believe, you and I here, that is foundational to the way we should live according to Scripture. but nonetheless, it works in life.
Yes.
Right?
I mean, think about those raising kids, right? I mean, your kids, when they get a certain age, you give them a little more responsibility. And if they fumble the ball, it's hard for you to give them more responsibility, right? I mean, the first time you give them a curfew and then all of a sudden they break the curfew, what do you do at that point? You're not going out anymore, right? You give them the keys to the car, trust them with the car, and they crash the car. What do you say? No more car, right?
That's it.
Yeah. So those same principles, if you think about it, becomes with the same riches that are given to you, right? If you are generous, if you are a good steward of the resources that are given to you, more will be given to you because you can be trusted with.
You can be trusted.
Yeah.
I can't remember all the details of this verse, but you know the verse where it says, "We're not going to do this whole eye for an eye thing."
Oh yes,
right?
Yeah.
Eye for eye. If a man wants you to walk a mile, walk two with him.
Yeah.
If he's suing you for
you get slapped in one cheek,
turn the
cheek.
other.
Yeah.
If he takes your shirt, give him your jacket too, type of thing.
Yeah.
Right. Completely backwards to the way we should live.
Mm-hmm.
But you think why? Why do that? Well, because kindness and generosity is the best strategy.
Yeah.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
It's paying it forward. It's creating, once again, a contribution to that dash in life that will last forever in place of what won't. You and I have the opportunity because we work here at a financial firm as wealth managers, as an investment firm. We manage, we understand, and I don't think we can take this for granted. We understand the concept of what it's like to manage someone else's wealth, to look at all that they have and to manage it for their benefit, not ours.
Not ours.
Right? For theirs. To do all that we possibly can to enhance their wealth for them and their family. And not a lot of people get to do that, but I think from our perspective, it allows us to kind of have a better understanding that what we have, how do we envision it? Is it ours? Do we own it? Or are we just simply good stewards or trying to be good stewards while we're here with what's been given, but technically it's not ours?
Right. Yeah. No, it's and what do you do? Right. And if you think about it again, going back to what we were saying before, we become good stewards of the finances and the money that clients give us the access and the ability to work on their behalf. We do a good job, and guess what? More blessings come to us.
That's
right?
that.
More clients, more referrals, more business, more opportunities to help more families and to help more charities and organizations and everything that these assets are directed and designed to do. But it all goes down to being a good steward of the responsibility that are being placed on you. Mm-hmm. And so it goes back, goes back to that full circle. You be generous, you have a sense of gratitude and thankfulness, and more is bestowed on you.
Yeah, I wanna tell one more story if it's okay. All right, this one,
got a lot of stories today.
I know.
Good stories. I love
stories.
Well,
you're hitting a topic that this was my life.
Yeah.
This was the life that I get to live because I had two parents that lived it so well.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that. I really am not one who I'm not taking any really ownership of that.
Yeah.
I am who I am much because of what was distilled into me at a very young age. And I look at this story, this whole idea that we can be a cheerful giver, and my statement that oftentimes the benefits of being generous happen after the act of being generous, right?
Okay.
It's a post thing.
Mm-hmm.
So Amy and I decided that we were going to foster years ago, and we're going through the process. Now, Mo, I'm going to tell you right now, that is a nasty, nasty process because you're going through what feels like a year's long worth of education. I'm like, you know what? I've raised 3 kids. The kids that we're about to accept clearly are in a worse situation, I would think, than my children. I know how to raise the kid. Can we not help them out? But you got to go through all these hoops. My darn dogs had to be vaccinated. Like, this is silly. Anyway, don't get me on that trail. So you're going through all that, right? That ain't fun.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You're giving up your weekends. You're having to go to these trainings. Not fun, right? But it was what was necessary to do what we intended and felt like we should do. Now, when I say that, I mean that Amy and I thought all along, we are the ones that are going to be able to be generous here. We're the ones that are going to help some children out. We're going to be the ones that are going to be able to invest in these children's lives. Okay? Fast forward. We get done with the training. We have the opportunity to get 2 kids. We get these 2 boys in our house. Okay? One's 3 months old. The other one is 7 years old. And we get them, and little did I know, the year that we were going to have them, we were going to shut down our offices in Atlanta, go fully remote. I was going to do a wedding for you and my sister in place of my father. I was going to do my very first and probably only first dance with my sister because my father was going to be in the emergency room in ICU, and ultimately my father was going to pass away. Okay? Not knowing all that. We go through that season of life, and I look back, the stable factor that I was able to contribute, really being able to make it through emotionally, were those boys. Honestly.
Yeah.
Because I look back and I say, and through that season, I'm like, I look at them. Well, why are they in foster care? Because their father's in prison for what he did. I had a dad they never had. I had a dad they likely will ever have. Okay? May not had him as long as I wanted, but they never had a dad like that. And then I start thinking about how happy they are. Why are they happy? Abused? In our house? Taken from their home? And so this bond and this connection, you get through that season of life, and I look back, and maybe we'll tell the full story later of where we're at today with those same children. But I look back and I thought, you know what? It might have been for them, but the Lord orchestrated this whole thing for us, for me.
Yeah.
This is about what I needed, not about what I could contribute. This was all for me. And I think when you really understand and grasp this whole the concept of being generous as a way of life, we contribute that to Scripture. We chalk it up to a greater being, a creator God, who ultimately made the best and the greatest sacrifice so that we could bypass this cost of death, the penalty of death. We contributed to that. Regardless of what you contributed to, generosity is a foundational concept that works, and we should all be that way.
That's a great story, and it's stories like that. And one of the things that leads to generosity, in my opinion, is when people hear other people being generous, right? Whether it's, again, time, money, resources, whatever. When people hear, it maybe sparks them to reevaluate their thinking or reevaluate their giving and say, well, maybe I should be giving more, right? And so that's why I love it, that story. But that story also makes me realize that time, right? You can't wait for a certain season of your life to be generous, because it's just in that story itself. Let's say you and Amy waited one more year, one more week.
Yeah,
you wouldn't have had those 2 boys. If you waited one more year,
that's true.
Think about it. One more year. Now COVID hits, office shutting down, father gets sick. Would you have even been in the position to even want to foster 2 boys?
True.
Right? So
true.
You have to do.
We literally got approved, and we got the phone call 2 days later for those boys. So you're right.
You got to do.
It just, you can't orchestrate that yourself.
Right.
You have to contribute that to something.
Yes.
You're right. You got to do. And we'll wrap it up with that for today's show on Beyond Tomorrow. Remember, to get to where you want to go in the future, the idea of this show is to take where you're trying to go and come back today and make better decisions. Sometimes, if you want to live a life later different, it's not just about saving more money today. It could be about being generous more today. Thanks for staying with us. Subscribe to our show. Check out last week's interview. Once again, an incredible interview with Kim Arthur at Main Management. We look forward to you guys coming back next week. You want to give a little intro for next week?
Part 2 of being generous.
Part 2 of being generous. Appreciate it. See you next week.